3 years ago, I was looking at the local jobs classified online when one of the ads caught my eye. Not because of what it said, though, but because it said so little, in fact. Best I remember, the ad just said, job available, good pay, no benefits, discretion required. It then listed an email address, and that was all. At the time, I was managing a music store, but I had already started hearing rumours that we would be shutting down within the next year, and the likelihood of a transfer to another store was slim. I had been morosely looking at job listings for the last few days, but this was the first one that actually stood out, if only because I was bored and it was weird. So I sent an email. Half an hour later, I had a response too, telling me to go to a particular office building in an upscale part of the city at a precise time for my screening. I went, and after waiting for a few minutes in the lobby, I was taken into an office where I was given a series of forms and questionnaires to fill out. They collected them and told me that they would be in touch. To be honest with you guys, I had almost forgotten about the whole thing until about a month later I got a call saying that I'd moved on to the second stage of the hiring process. I was again given an address and a time, and when I arrived, this time it was a different nice office park, 20 miles away from the first one, I was met by a man who introduced himself as Mr. Solomon. He escorted me into a large room that contained a chair and a desk. On the desk were 2 large monitors, a keyboard and a mouse, and a bolted-down metal box with 2 oversized buttons on it, one red and one green. He told me that this room was a model for the place that I would be working if I took the job, and he described the job as follows. I would be working 7 shifts of 6 hours every week. My job would be simple. I would arrive at work 10 minutes early and enter an outer area that was like a locker room. I would have my own personal locker, and I would store all of my belongings in the locker and change into the provided work clothes. And I was never, under any circumstances, to carry any item of my own into the surveillance room. I was never, under any circumstance as well, to take any item with me from the surveillance room. As for what I was to do in the surveillance room, I was told that the monitor on the left would constantly show a live stream from a high-definition camera in a remote location. My job was simply to just watch the camera. Once an hour, I would get onto the computer attached to the right monitor and enter a brief log describing anything interesting that occurred in the last hour. I would have no pens or pencils or paper, and I should never try to take any kind of written notes about the work. As for the red and green buttons, the red button was only to be used if there was an emergency. This meant that something on the video or in my workspace that required outside help. The green button was to be hit if I saw something on the video feed that was particularly noteworthy. It would tell other people somewhere that, at least in my opinion, something interesting was going on. Solomon stressed that while I was given discretion on when to use this button, I should err on the side of only using it if and when something of real significance occurred. He pointed out the camera on the ceiling of the room that we were in. He said the real room would be the same. My work would be observed, and other people were watching the room on the video feed as well. He said that I was only a redundancy in case other systems failed. He then smirked and asked if I knew what he meant by redundancy. I nodded, trying not to show my irritation. I don't talk that good to people, so sometimes they think that I'm dumb, I suppose, but that's okay. Let him think that if he paid me good enough, right? And mind you, the pay was very good, at $35 an hour, in fact. I must admit, though, that this worried me. I was already thinking this was some kind of a psych experiment or secret government job, which I was okay with, but that kind of money to just sit and watch a screen? My mum always told me that if something seems too good to be true, that it probably is, and this was definitely seeming too good to be true. I asked if I was going to be doing anything illegal. Solomon laughed and said no. I asked if anyone was going to get hurt. Again, he shook his head no. He said the reason that they were paying me so much was because they needed employees that were motivated to be professional and discreet. The work that they were doing was important, and for various reasons it just couldn't be discussed. if I took the job, I would have to sign papers promising that I would never discuss my work there or I could be sued or locked up. I'm only breaking that now because of, well, everything that's happened. So, I took the job, and because they wanted me to start right away, I had to quit the store with no notice. I did feel bad about that, but I was excited about the new job too. It was a lot of money and seemed like easy enough work, if a bit boring, I suppose. I was nervous that there was something more to it though, but I told myself that I would just have to see. No point in chickening out and wasting a good chance because I let my imagination go crazy. I was given the location of the job itself, and when I went there, I was amazed that it really was just like the model room that I'd been shown, with only a few differences. There was a locker room that you had to pass through to enter the surveillance room, and there was a small bathroom attached to the real surveillance room also. The real room had a small water cooler in the corner, but because I wasn't allowed to bring anything in with me, I had to eat before or after every shift. The biggest difference, of course, was that the monitors, they were turned on. The right monitor was just a black and white terminal like you see in movies sometimes. I could type in logs, but no internet to look at or anything like that. The left monitor, though, it was a video of a room. You could call it a bedroom, I guess, because it did have a bed in it, but it had lots of other stuff too. A TV, a sofa, and chairs, a couple of tables, and plenty of empty space in between. The camera must be high up in a corner because I could see pretty much everything except for the far sides of the furniture. At first, though, I didn't notice any of that stuff because all I saw was her. She looked to be older than me and was very pretty. When I first saw her, she was laying on her side on the sofa. That was the part of the room farthest from the camera, but the picture was very clear and I could tell that she was sleeping. I found myself leaning into the monitor more so that I could see her better, and I thought about what I was doing and I kind of felt embarrassed. It's like I was spying on her or something. A peeping Tom, my mum used to call it. I didn't want to be a peeping Tom, but I didn't want to be silly either. I needed to think about it slow. It was a job, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? I wasn't hurting anybody, and the woman looked fine, and the room was nice. She probably agreed to be there anyway, and it's all some experiment or something. I was just overreacting. So I sat down in the chair, and I began my work. It didn't take long, though, before I understood more. The woman, I took to calling her Rachel, wasn't there of her own free will. I never saw her hurt, but it was clear that she never left that room except to go into what I think was a bathroom area that my camera couldn't see. Well, that's not entirely accurate because she never left the room on her own, I suppose. Periodically, usually a couple of times a week during my shifts, men and women in strange-looking outfits would come in and take her from the room. Sometimes she would struggle, but usually she would just go along with her head hung low. They would always bring her back, though the times when she wasn't brought back during my shift were always the worst for me. I would always worry about her until I got to work the next day and saw her in the room watching TV or painting. But she never looked hurt or even that upset, except for when they took her, and even when she fought, they were always gentle with her. But still, I knew something was wrong about this. I considered quitting the job or hitting the red button and getting someone to come so that I could get some answers, or even calling the police and showing them what the camera was showing me. Except I was scared. Scared of losing my job and scared of what these people might actually do to me if I quit or told on them. Solomon had told me that when I took the job that part of being discreet was not asking questions. I would never be asked to do more than what I'd already been told, but I could never tell anyone what I did or saw, and I could never ask questions about what I was doing or why. So I made excuses. It was all an experiment, she was crazy or sick and they were just trying to help her, she was doing a job just like I was, or if she really was a prisoner somewhere, at least I was watching to make sure that she was okay. If they ever tried to hurt her, or I saw that she really didn't want to be there for sure, I could get help then. In a way, I told myself, I was helping to protect her by watching. I don't expect you to think much of my excuses. I don't think much of them myself, especially now, but in my defense, when these things changed, I didn't ignore it or try to explain it away. I knew something had to be done. Rachel would usually paint for an hour or two every day, and it seemed to always be during my afternoon shifts. The room had no windows as far as I could tell, but I guess she either used a clock or her own body's time to keep to a kind of schedule of sorts. I always liked to watch her paint. The thing she was painting was always facing the wrong way for me to see, but I could see her face as she worked. And she always looked peaceful and happy when she was painting. And seeing her that way, smiling serenely from time to time as she got something the way she wanted it, always made my day. But I first noticed something was wrong when she started painting more frequently a few weeks ago. Her expression was more focused and serious, and there was a tension to her movements that I wasn't used to seeing. At first, I thought that she was just really trying to work hard on something, and I wanted to tell her not to worry. Every few weeks, the others would come in and take the old paintings out anyway, bringing in a new stack of, I think the word is canvas? But it was more than her being focused. Something was just definitely wrong. She didn't look happy, and she was going for hours at a time. In the span of 3 days, she had finished 4 paintings. I had been growing more and more worried watching her work, and when she finished the 4th, I found myself telling her to just stop and rest a while. I had grown accustomed to talking to the monitor, talking to her in my own way, but she didn't stop. Instead, she began moving the paintings, arranging them on the back seat of the long sofa at the far end of the room. And this was the first time that I'd gotten to see any of the paintings. Even when the others were taking them out, they always seemed to be turned away from the camera. I was still worried about her, but I was also happy to finally see something that she had worked on, happy and amazed. And boy, were they beautiful. One was a beautiful green forest, another was an old stone wall, a third was a house sitting alone on a small island, and the last was some sort of old-fashioned looking movie theater. All of them looked like something out of a dream, with trailing lines of color mixing into the air around them like leaves caught in the wind or something. It was only when I looked close that I realized that the lines of color weren't random, they were words. Easy to miss if you weren't looking close, and by themselves they didn't seem to mean much. Just the ghost of a word somewhere in each of the paintings. Easy to lose in everything else that was being shown. I leaned into the monitor and I squinted, trying to read the words. And then my heart started thudding as I made them out. Blinking and rubbing my eyes, I looked again. Reading them out loud in order, left to right, top pair then bottom, it read, "Please help me, Thomas." I pushed back from the monitor, my hand kind of over my mouth. I really didn't know what to do with this. I didn't know how any of this could be happening, because it wasn't just that she was asking for help, though that was a big part of it. It was that my name is Thomas. I thought about the camera above me and quickly took my hand away from my face. I rolled back to the desk and sat there, trying to stop shaking, trying to make myself take a breath, think about it slow. And the first thing was, should I hit a button? The red button was for an emergency after all. If she was a prisoner or something and she was trying to escape, they might think that that was an emergency. But no one had been hurt that I knew of, at least. And I think Mr. Solomon meant to save that for something that was like a police or ambulance emergency, not something like this. But what about the green button? This was definitely something noteworthy. Not only that she was asking for help, but that she was asking me for help. I made myself stop for a moment. I couldn't know for sure that she was asking me. I'd gone to school with several boys named Thomas. It was a common name. But the chances of her painting that name when I was working here? Really? I didn't want to be silly, but I wasn't trying to be too... I don't know. What's the word? Mum used to say it when she read her angel books. Skeptics. I didn't want to be a skeptic either. I had to believe it was probably meant for me, and that was something that they would want to know. But should I hit the green button? My hands were drifting towards the metal box on the desk, but I hesitated. I didn't like breaking rules, and I was scared of what would happen if I broke these. If they really were holding her prisoner, then they would probably be very bad people. But I didn't know that. Maybe they were good and she was bad. But I looked back at the monitor for the first time since reading the words. Rachel was already moving the paintings back off the sofa as though she knew the messages had been received. A canvas in each hand, she glanced up at the camera as she moved across the room, and it felt like she was looking right at me. My chest tightened as my hands moved away from the buttons. No, I didn't think she was bad. I had watched her for years. I felt like I knew her and would know if she was bad. Strange as it seemed, in a way, she was my friend, and I was going to try and help her. I spent the rest of my shift trying to act normal and think of what to do next. I knew whoever else was watching might have noticed the paintings or seen how I acted, but I couldn't worry about that. I would just try to play it cool and try to think about how I could help her. The only people I had actually met connected to this job were a couple of people when I filled out the papers, and then Mr. Solomon when he showed me the model room and told me the job. I had no way of contacting any of them except through the buttons. My checks were deposited electronically, and I had never run into anyone else who worked at the surveillance room. And that thought made me stop for a second. I had always thought that it was weird that I never ran into someone when I was coming or going. The person I was taking over for, or the person who was taking over for me. I had always figured that there must be other people, other surveillance rooms even, and they just scheduled us so that we didn't run into each other. But I still thought that there were others. A part of why I thought that was because it seemed like I wasn't the only person who used my surveillance room. The water cooler, the toilet paper, the soap, they all seemed to go down faster than I think I was using it by myself. If that was true, maybe I could figure out who they were, and maybe they would be safer to talk to than whoever it was that I worked for. I got off work at 8 that night, and instead of grabbing some food and going home, I drove my car around the block and then parked down the street from the building where I worked. Nothing had changed while I drove around for a minute. No new cars had parked or anything, and if I was right, they didn't send anyone to replace me until they were sure that I was gone anyhow. So I sat and waited. I was tired, and the street was pretty empty and boring, but I was too excited and scared to fall asleep. Every time a car passed or someone walked down the sidewalk, I tensed. I kept imagining an SUV or a van pulling up behind me, men getting out and pulling me from my car and taking me somewhere like they had Rachel to kill or torture me. Half a dozen times I almost cranked up and just drove away, but every time I would think of her alone in that room, she just had no one but me to help her, and I had to try. And 2 hours later, a fat balding man parked and started heading for the building. As soon as I saw that he was able to unlock the door and enter, I opened my car door to go and talk to him. But then I stopped. I needed to be smart. I didn't know where they were, but I was sure that they had hidden cameras in the locker room and outside the building even. If I go running in there and confront that guy, they'll know for sure that I'm up to something. Sighing with frustration, I shut the door back and waited until the shift was over. I considered tailing him like in the movies, but I was scared that I would just lose him or he would call someone for help. So I waited until he was walking back to his car after a 6-hour shift, hopefully far enough away that the cameras wouldn't see. And then I met the man that I came to know as Charles Jeffries. Hey man, can I talk to you for a minute? His back was to me and he just waved his hand absently without looking up. Sorry, I don't have any money. Have a good... He froze as he glanced back at me while walking. Oh, God. No. "You need to get out of here, kid. We aren't allowed to do this. We're not allowed to talk." I could tell that he was scared, but I couldn't risk letting him go just yet. Not after all of this. I stepped up and pushed the door back shut as he was trying to get into his car. "So you know who I am then?" I tried to sound mean, but I could hear how mad I was in my voice. He yanked at the door again, but I was still holding it, and I was stronger than he was. After a second, a weaker tug, he turned around, his face strained and tired looking. "Yeah, I know who you are. You work here just like me. And I'm telling you, we aren't supposed to be talking. We aren't supposed to meet, ever." I frowned. "Mr. Solomon never told me that. He never said it was one of the rules." The man shook his head. "Mr. Solomon? Yeah. Well, there are plenty of rules that they don't tell you. I bet they didn't tell you what you were going to be watching before you started, did they?" When I just lowered my eyes, he went on. "Yeah, me neither. I've been at this job for 10 years now. I've seen other people come and go, usually because they broke one of those rules that they never mentioned. The only reason I'm still here, kid, is because I kept my head down and my mouth shut." He wagged a finger at me. "And you should do the same, if it's not already too late." I felt my stomach curling into a cold knot. "Too late?" The man rubbed his face. "Kid, do you think they don't know we're talking? Do you think anything happens that they don't know about?" He looked back toward the building, a look of sadness and fear in his eyes. "Hell, for all I know, you've already killed us both." Shaking his head, he pushed me back and started opening the door. "Either way, I'm done risking it. You need to stop asking questions and just do your job. It's a lot healthier." And with that, he got into his car and shut the door. I didn't try to stop him this time. Even though I had already been worried about what he was telling me, hearing it confirmed was paralyzing. What exactly was my plan? He probably didn't know any more than I did, and even if he did, what could I do with anything that he told me? I walked back to my car with a heavy heart, and I was still afraid, but more than that, I was sad and ashamed. I wanted to help Rachel, but I wasn't sure how. I wasn't giving up, but as I drove back to my apartment, I couldn't think of what I should do next. This wasn't a movie, and I certainly wasn't a hero. And the only ideas that I had left were to either go to the police, who might be controlled by whoever I worked for, or try to get proof of her being held prisoner myself. As I parked my car and walked into my apartment building, I made a decision. And unless I thought of something better overnight, I would do both ideas. Tomorrow, I would break the rule about carrying anything in. I'd use my phone to record a video of the surveillance room, of Rachel and how she was trapped somewhere, and of me telling everything else I knew. And I would email it to every newspaper, website, and internet channel that I could think of. I'd then go to the police and give them a copy too, if I could make it that long without getting caught. And maybe if I did all that, even if they got me, someone could help Rachel. I was filled with worry and dread at the idea of being hurt or killed. I admit that. A part of me kept saying that I should just do as I'm told and hope that it all went away. But I just couldn't live with myself if I did that. Even if I messed up, I felt like I had to try. I was so preoccupied with my own thoughts, too, that I didn't even hear the person coming up behind me as I unlocked my apartment door. "Thomas?" I turned around and felt my legs weaken as I stumbled back against my door. I had to be dreaming or crazy. I grabbed the doorknob for support as I looked at the woman in front of me. It couldn't be her, but somehow it was. Rachel? G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.